I don't know what's coming, and we just try and figure it out as we go. So we'll be answering everything in Cinema 4D, but the questions might not come from Cinema 4D. Feel free to ask questions that are involving a link. Otherwise, type something in bold if it's like a typed out question, and then we can also try to address that. I'll keep an eye on the chat. We already got a bunch of links popping up today. The chat's going crazy, which is amazing. Which I super appreciate. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. We already said some hellos earlier, so let's just dive right on in. Man. Okay. I'm going to share the screen and we will start clicking links directly. So let's see. Tom got in with the very first one. Thoughts on this one? So let me just read through because we have a bunch of different things coming in. Jess, feel free to type the question in. I'll try and keep an eye out for it, but I'm going to click this link from Tom. And wait, even opened in the correct window. All right, so what do we got? This is from StrackNL, or maybe it's Strackenel. Either way, it sounds cool. Oh, Strack. So let's see what we got here. Oh, that's neat. Oh, you know what's funny? This is actually an excellent question. Although the these connections, no, those connections make sense. Okay. So first of all, they are saying that, well, it's rendered in cycles, but it's made in Cinema 4D. So this is actually an excellent question. Just to give a little bit of context. So this is a free live stream. It's every Wednesday during the season, which is typically what somewhere between 26 and 36 episodes, depending on the year. But I've been through Patreon running a bonus stream, and on the bonus stream, I try and dive a lot deeper on something that, or just trying to learn something more. And last week we got a question about these ribbons, and during this stream we couldn't get it working very well. So I spent another 2 hours during that second live stream just trying to figure it out, just figuring out the different details and limitations. And I actually recorded an entire video and sent it over to Maxon about some notes of things that didn't seem to work intuitively anyway. But in any case, we learned a bunch of things about the technique. And now, because we have this question, and it's actually using very similar techniques, we can actually spend a little bit of time and try and use what I learned last week and apply it here. So I'm actually very excited about that. So with that in mind, we will switch the camera over here and begin to try and figure this out. So once again, very cool piece here from Strack. I am mostly interested in the technical aspect of this, but let's see what we can do. So of course we're in R21. We're going to start out from scratch, although we'll be using a lot of the same techniques that we did last time. Let's see. We're going to be doing different scales on these. So what's the best way to do it? I guess we'll have to just make, we'll have to be very specific on the end sides. Or is it, let me think, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of different things to think about here for subdivisions. So what am I thinking? If we make this a uniform subdivision, let's say it's subdivided, and if I crank this up, and crank that up. Okay, cool. It does get really low poly. So that's good. So we've got a circle shape, and usually I would use an end side, but that gives us very specific point counts. What I want to do is have this be more based on, not a specific point count. Excuse me. Nico is saying that Strack had mentioned that he did this with XP Dynamics. Man, we gotta just maybe that's something to tackle tomorrow in the bonus stream, is just playing with some of the XP Dynamic stuff, because it's just not something I played with, even though I know it's really powerful. So we just gotta start learning it. But let's do this with vanilla cinema, because I think we can. Okay. The reason I'm using a circle spline is because we can set a maximum length based on a distance and not a set number of counts. So we'll do that here, and I'm not sure what number we want, so let's jump to 10. That's probably gonna be too much, yeah. We actually, typically 10 has been a good number for us. So about every 10 units here, it should be creating a point. So let's just visualize this a little bit better, because I think this will be handy. So creating a sphere, putting into a cloner, putting the cloner onto object mode, and putting that onto the circle. And I'm going to tell it I want to clone onto the vertexes. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, well, it's not cloning onto the vertexes of the final object. It's cloning them onto the original points. We actually might be able to get around that if I put this circle into a connect object. If I hold down Alt, it will automatically put it inside. And now if I tell that to clone onto the connect object instead, It's not viewing it as a spline, so we have to tell Cinema that this is a spline. I always found this a little bit clunky, but if we put this into a spline mask, holding an Alt again, then that is now being treated as a spline. The weird part there is that the connect object is still going to, I'm sorry, the cloner is still looking at the connect. We didn't change the connect, we changed it as parent, but now the cloner is viewing this child as a spline. Very strange, but hey, that's what it is. Now, I'm going to set the radius of the sphere to 10. We can now see that based on these subdivisions, that these are overlapping each other. So we might actually want a radius of 5. There we go. At the radius of 5, I would think that these would all be but perfectly touching each other. It's pretty close there, and subdivide doesn't exactly go in units. There's angles and whatnot to it. But that's kind of what we're visualizing here. So you can see with a radius of 5 that this is what we get. Now, if we want to turn this, and that's just a reference, that's fine. But if we want to make this dynamic, I'm going to leave it at 0, 0, 0. Let's subtract this floor to -5. I think that will work. And then add soft body dynamics, simulation, soft body. And if we hit play, then that should just fall to the ground. We won't see much. This is, visually is getting blocked. In fact, just for fun, I'm going to rewind all the way, scoot it to the side just so we can see it. So if I hit play, we should see it fall. Actually, we have to make the floor dynamic. That'll help. So you can see it falls to the ground. Boop, and it actually does fall a little bit. Or maybe it's even hopping because the floor might be intersecting. So we'll have to find out. So when it comes to this, we need to give it a margin. Now, I've been trying to do some extra research lately on the difference between size increment and margin, and I got to tell you, it still does not make sense to me, even as I go deeper into it. But okay, now you can see I've given it a margin of 5, which essentially means it's creating these little spherical radiuses around every one of the points that's being generated. And now if I play, you'll see it doesn't look like it falls, and that's because this floor is exactly 5 units below that. If we set the floor to, let's say, -15, it should now fall 10 units. So we now got that radius. But you can see that if these little spheres, if our margin here was bigger than this 5, it's going to be too big for the shape, and thus it will cause it to explode. So just for fun, we'll jump that up to 11, and you should see that it's going to explode, and you can see that the different lengths, you can imagine these spheres suddenly being twice their radius. They're going to be intersecting a bunch, so it has to explode outward so it's no longer intersecting. So that is the basic idea. Now we can get rid of the cloner and the copy spline, and rewind to 0, and we will set this back to a margin of 5, which is quite reasonable, and we'll even zero it out on Z. Okay, cool. So you can see that's the idea behind what we're doing, and now we could sweep this with a radius of 5 if we weren't so inclined. All right, now we don't want to emulate the pattern exactly here, but he's got a bunch of overlapping sphere. I mean, I kind of wish we'd start with a cube now because well, let's just see what we can get here. We'll just have some fun. So we've got a circle. It's got that radius. If I were to make I'm gonna make a duplicate of this circle, and then make a cloner, and I'm gonna make a duplicate of this circle into the cloner. Set the cloner to object mode. The object will be second circle spline that I created. T for scale on the radius, which means I can just increase that a little bit, and I'm gonna make a bunch of little circles around the outside. So I was just making this. I guess I didn't need to clone into an object. I could have just on a radial. So I can increase the count until these are all very close to each other. I actually don't want to get too close because they need to be the radius away from each other. And now just for clarity, I could make another duplicate of this. And as I was just saying, I could do a radial instead, and I didn't need to make that extra clone. So yeah, something like that. I think we'll do something like this as our base shape. Now we can visually ignore this one because that was that's just creating a clone. And why don't we trap everything inside of a second circle here? So that's the idea. If we hit play right now, I think everything should work properly. Hit play, and interesting. When I'm going to grab these two circles, and when I scaled them down, it also scaled the maximum length down. So we need to reset that back to 10. And I hope that it doesn't scale the tag, but it did scale that property. But okay, this shouldn't explode anymore. So now I hit play. Now it doesn't explode. Nothing even happens. It just sits on the ground. Excellent. All working perfectly well. Now, something I would like to do is try and group all these and see if we can control it all with one dynamics tag. This is an experiment. I don't know if this will work. So if we put these all in a null, and I move one of the tags up and I delete the other ones, The defaults in Cinema 4D R21 say that the tag, it should inherit. It'll apply the tag to the children. So let's see if this can, well, I guess visually we won't see anything. So I'll just move the floor down a little bit. So now we should see it fall. Yeah, they all fall. So it seems like they are still dynamic. We're still getting that refresh at 0 isn't working properly. So we'll just continue to deal with that. -5. All right. Now, okay, now what's cool is that we're controlling this via a single tag, so it's easy. We don't have to make changes to a bunch of different tags. So we don't want any bounce, we don't want any friction, and even collision noise. I don't know if that's going to help. This just adds a little bit of variation to the way that the dynamics are bouncing. So we'll get rid of all those. Now, what the plan is we want to keyframe our rest length for it to start growing, or the alternative would be we start shrinking something here. So I think growing here would be probably a good idea. But what I'd love to do is trap these in some sort of circular shape. So this is kind of a little bit of a spoiler for the upcoming tutorial, but something I've been experimenting with a lot is if we were to just trap all these, let's say we trap them inside of a sphere. We can make the sphere invisible and then make it so they can be trapped inside. They can escape very easily. I'm almost inclined, yeah, let's see if we can, let's intentionally do it the bad way so that when it breaks, we can see how to fix it. So under render tags, we will add a display tag, set it to lines, and we can see exactly the cage that it's in. I don't want it to take too long to calculate, but I'll add a couple extra segments. Excellent. Scoot it up just so it's not right on that edge. And that's all good. So hitting play, nothing should change. It'll just sit there. Now, if we keyframe the rest length, and we do have to keyframe it. We could, here, let's intentionally break it again. Let's save it before we intentionally break it. So episode 6, scene files. Spline cells. Yeah, that's good enough for me. If you don't know, if you are supporting on Patreon, then you can get access to all of these scene files after the episode. All right, so I'm going to jump this up to 200, so it's double the current size. And I want to be careful because it's going to be bad. I'm going to go 1 frame forward. Not sure what happened. 1 more frame forward, and we're going to see that these are going to start exploding really quickly. And several things. First of all, we didn't make the sphere dynamic, so ignore that. But you can see that they're exploding very quickly. It's not very controlled, and we'll put into a more controlled form here in a moment. So I'm going to steal the dynamics tag from the floor. Where it is, you see dynamic is off, so it's just a collider body. Collision is going to be set to a static mesh, and that means it can be trapped inside, so that's fine. And one more thing I just know for a fact that we're going to want to do is if we're working on kind of a 2-dimensional plane here, so these points cannot get through a floor. If you shoot 2 dynamic shapes at each other that they can start intersecting, something cannot go through the floor. It's like mathematically impossible because it knows that it cannot. But a floor is infinite. Nothing can go below -y. So we did this last week. But if I take this floor, spin it around 180 degrees, and then move it up to +5 units, we are now trapping, I can move this above because it is above in the viewport. These are now, it's like the splines are like a sandwich in between these 2 floor pieces of bread. One's pointing down, the other's pointing up. They're perfectly trapped in those 10 units. So that means they can't escape outward and above. Now, our splines, move this up. Our splines are still set to jump to a rest length of 200. So I'm going to hit save again just in case and hit play. And now we can see they're spinning. Actually, it did a pretty good job. That's not bad. I thought that would be worse. What I like to do is have a little more control over it, which is to keyframe it over the course of a couple of frames. So setting the rest length, it didn't explode here, and I don't know if I can push it far enough. I can just tell you that I know for a fact that I've run into, okay, I pushed it too far there, but you can see immediately it freaked out a little bit. Setting it to the default of 100, keyframing it, and moving forward even like 5 frames and getting to your next scale, let's say 150. And then hitting play, we can transition between those 2 scales, and it's a lot more reasonable. So, that worked nicely there. There's nothing super crazy. It looks like 150 is about the scale where it will fill up most of the volume here. And yeah, there we go. We get the splines. Now, nothing's escaping out of our cage of a sphere yet, but I'm going to leave it broken. Well, it's not broken. It hasn't broken yet. But if it breaks, then we'll talk about the fix. So this is a very simple version of it, but let's see if we can get this working. And I don't know if we will be able to. Now, something we learned during my bonus stream is that we need to bake this out and bake it out to alembic. Now, R20 and R21 makes this pretty trivial, but there's a couple details we learned. First of all, let's get a little bit of motion in here. I want some extra wiggling going on. So under simulate forces, we will create the new field force. And with the field force, we can start giving this under the object tab, not the fall off. I do that all the time. Under object, we'll feed a random field. Now, typically the random field's actually facing, it's going to randomly push these in all directions, which is bad, but we're perfectly trapped on the floor, so it's going to completely ignore going up and down, so we can actually keep this rig more simple. Now, scaling up this is going to start putting some coherence in the noise overall. I want there to be a lot more strength. 55 is pretty good. And an animation speed of not too crazy. Let's say 25%. Let's just hit play and see what we get. Probably need some more frames as well. 333. Save it, hit play, and let's see what we start getting. So this grew, and now hopefully we'll see that we'll get a little bit of motion out of this. It's not moving too much, so there's definitely motion, but not as much as I want. I mean, keep in mind it's playing back at a third the speed, but I'm going to make it 3 times as strong on the wind, on the strength here. So hopefully we can see these start doing a little bit of a transition. I don't know if the scale is too large, but we can definitely see there's a little bit of motion overall. Now we could inflate these a little bit more. You see there is a little bit of space between them. So I think that would probably be a good idea. Or we have to put a few more spheres. Once again, we have to rewind, go forward to frame it, backward to frame in order to catch it. I'm going to attempt to just create an extra copy and increase the radius. So there's an extra sphere in there. We'll grab the outer one, also create an extra one, maybe even an extra 2. And if I increase the outer, which one is this referencing? This one. If I increase the radius, they shouldn't be intersecting. So there, we just filled up the space a little bit more. Not too much, but it shouldn't change too much. It's going to expand. There'll be less space in between. And yeah, okay, that's working nicely. There should be no friction because the floors have no friction. And at this point, I'm just inclined to keep on cranking up our field force to be stronger and stronger until we start seeing some distinct motion here. Now, it's not animating very fast, so I'll crank that up a little more. Okay, a little more animation speed seems to do a decent amount. And we can see these start wiggling, and they're scaled up so much that, they're filling up the space quite nicely. We could scale them up more, but, that's working all right. I do still wish there was a little more motion. I'm going to crank up the speed to be 3 times fast at that. Yeah, they seem to be blobbing around okay. There's definitely still some air in there. But I don't want to push the limits too hard on that. I guess we can just grab the second keyframe right here, grabbing the dynamics tag, and I will scale this to 160. Not that much more, another 10%, but that should go a long way to filling up that extra space. Okay, good enough for me. Visually going to hide the field force so it's not taking up space, and our sphere here is doing a great job, but I'm going to hide that because this is all trapped in here just fine. All right, so these are, it's funny, this outside is actually taking on the shape of that sphere because it doesn't have that many polygon segments, so something to keep in mind. So I've played with this technique a lot, which is why I seem to know what I'm talking about here, because I've actually done a lot of tinkering with this kind of stuff. It's really fun. All right, but now is where things might get a little bit more challenging because we need to essentially combine all these into a single spline, and that is easier said than done. If we try and take this and put it into a connect right now and extrude it, it is not going to work. So how do we actually make this start working? Well, we need to, first of all, bake it. So I'm going to select the dynamics tag and let's say bake all. And I hope, the scene's almost 300 frames. We shouldn't, if we're doing these tests, I'm just going to drop it back down to 100. It's not going to play for that long of animation, but at the end we could make it longer. So bake all just at 111 frames. Excellent. All right. So if we have play, I mean, this is, we should be able to scrub now. It's pretty good. Definitely something I've noticed is the dynamics. The final frame is always a little bit glitchy, but, just cut off the last frame. Um, I've also noticed where things aren't correct on frame one, but these are all things we can deal with, especially because, and I'm just saying this is a fact because we did a lot of testing last week. What we'll now do is bake this to Alembic. Although if we last time we made it, well, let's just see what happens. I'm going to bake to Alembic. And there we go. Well, we got a null. And it doesn't have the children. That's not what we were getting last time. These are baked. Well, let's just do some tinkering. I'm pretty sure this won't work, but let's try putting them all into a connect. So they've all been turned into one object. And I'm going to create an extrude. We'll put this into the extrude. And immediately, I think we see that it's not. Oh, okay. It is. Okay. Well, right now. Oh, yeah. That was always the problem. It's returning geometry right now, but if I hit play, it doesn't play. So this does not work if we hit play. So I'm going to attempt to grab this connect and bake it as Alembic. Let's see what that does. So it's claiming it's a spline. We put this into the, actually, let's see if it plays. Hit play. And yeah, here's the Alembic. It baked that out as a spline, and it is now an Alembic file. If I take that and put it into the extrude, let's see if that plays. Yes, it does. Okay, so, I mean, almost immediately you can see that we are getting the overall effect from that animation. So let's change, let me make material on here so we can see it a little bit better. And we will make it a nice teal color. So yeah, there we go. You can see that we are getting something similar to shape. We're inverting from one spot to the other, but I'm glad we're doing that because I don't want to make something too similar. The big point here being is to play around and try and make it your own and change the overall effect of everything that's going to be happening here. Something that would be kind of fun would be to clone a couple of spheres inside here, and those will actually be bouncing around and trapped in between the floor as well. I might actually go and do that. But you can see that these are all getting extruded very nicely. And yeah, that works well. Now, I would like to try and push this a little bit and see if we can get them to smooth out more, but I'm not sure if the technique will work. It begins with creating a tracer object, and I'm going to feed the tracer, yeah, this connect object. I'm going to visually hide everything. And if we take the tracer and say, I want to connect all elements, yeah, it doesn't, and unfortunately it doesn't work because every one of these splines is connecting to the next one. So there's actually a tracer version of it. If I play, it's going to be tracing the entire thing. You see how it's doing a great job of tracing the entire thing. But the sad part is that the tracer is interconnecting them. So the tracer can't view this per segment. It can only do it as a whole on all of them. So yeah, that's too bad, but it's just the limitation of it. Unless we can close it. Nope, closing doesn't work there. That would have been a way to smooth it out. But in any case, we've now got a very nice version of this. It's simple to subdivide this. If we wanted to, the extrusion, of course, we've got the nice new caps inside. I'm going to turn off start cap and just keep the end cap with this upper one. We've got the new beautiful bevels inside of our 21, so I could actually increase this all the way or just something quite high, but let's try pushing it all the way and see, so we end up with this shape, which should automatically be pretty cool. Hit play. That's all working quite nicely. If we were to take this shape, I don't know if those get welded together. They may or may not, but if we create a subdivision surface and throw that inside of there, it will smooth those out. I doubt they got connected, so just as an experiment to find out, put that into a connect, and now they do get welded. Oh, there doesn't. Well, there you can see one point right there is welding or unwelding, but it actually does seem like when these caps run into each other, they do get welded. Well, that's actually good to know and surprising. I'm glad that they do. So yeah, I mean, we could pull this radius back and not let it go too far. And you can see we get a little bit of subdivision weirdness here. It's probably because these caps are n-gons. So if we were inclined, we could change it to something like Delaunay. Delaunay is, of course, well, we can tell Delaunay to try and be quad. So wherever it can be a quad, it will be. And that should subdivide nicer. So you can see you don't get those stretches that we were. So now we get this rounded out. We get these nice little pincy shapes, pinched shapes all over the place. We should get pretty good playback because the spline isn't dynamic anymore. It's just playing based on the final shape. And you can see how much control we have over, just changing the overall style of this. We can round it out just a little bit. You get these nice sharp ones, round it out a lot, get these more blob shapes. The entire thing could be fed into a volume builder. And of course, make completely different geometry based off of that. But there we go. By baking it to Alembic. Oh, and let me throw this out there as well. Remember, we were doing we baked all the splines. You do have to do this cache. We are definitely running into some weirdness when, if you don't bake it, the Alembic, if you don't cache the dynamics, then when the Alembic plays through, you'd think that would take, that would do the dynamics as well. But we found that they would give inconsistent results. So you want to bake that and then bake to Alembic. And that seemed to be the workflow that was very smooth. And these all combine very nicely. I'm quite happy with the ability to put that into a connect and then bake out the connect to Alembic. It's just the extrude doesn't like the connect directly. So I'm always a little bit sad when we have to bake to Alembic, but R21 makes it so easy to do. So slightly less parametric, but very easy to go back at any point to our original one and create whatever shape that we like. Let's see, any follow-up questions on this little thing while we're still here? Just to throw it out, well, I mean, just for fun, I'm going to, let's delete that, Alembic, turn this on, turn that off, clear the cache, and just for fun, I'm going to put some cells inside of these. So if I were to take a second circle, make it a child, T for scale, and scale that down, now we have a second circle on the inside of that, and now if I were to bake that again, then those should also be hollow. So just the way I'm layering up these different rings is creating various different shapes. Eric is saying from earlier, I could uncheck merge all in the Alembic export. That very well could be, but we're still ending up with a good result right now. So I'm not even sure where you would do that. But bake as Alembic, and maybe it's in the checkbox. But now that gets created, and maybe, what are you referring to? I don't see any merge or anything. But in any case, we've now pulled that out. We can feed this in again, and I can see those are our hollow rings. They look a little bit like calamari. And if we apply, then now those will be hollow rings, just like the outer ones. And they should have the same thickness, because the thickness ultimately is the radius or the margin of 5. So those end up being some cool little blobs as well. I wouldn't eat them, but that's pretty cool. I like it. Let's see. I don't see any specific questions about this one coming in. Got a thumbs up. Thanks, Spatten. But yeah, let's give this one a incremental save. What is incremental save? I've only just started doing it. Control, Alt, Shift. There we go. Alt. And let's jump back in and do some questions. I think I cut you off guard, so nobody's posted new ones. I'm gonna scroll up to where we had a whole bunch of them. And let's see what we got. Let's see. I want to see, because I like typed questions. And Herrerasaurus, Jess, is asking about putting fish scales on a weird shape, but want it as a mesh and not displacement. Ooh, that gets real tricky. Fish scales are just, like scales in general, are very difficult. And if you look at the way they flow on something, they always, when they turn different corners, when they're on the different curves, when two different angles meet each other, very unique and strange things happen where they will be different scale, or yeah, the scales will be different scales. So a lot of it turns into, you want to prevent intersection, but there's a lot of trouble with it. Let's just see. Let's just make a quick testing piece of geometry. So I want to keep, well, actually, no, I'm not trying to keep it clean. So we'll extrude there. D for extrude here. That'll give us a corner there. Grab these. I for inner extrude. D for extrude. D for extrude. And let's make one tiny one here. We'll do that. And do this. Okay, so we've got some very strange geometry here. Let's do one extra shape there, get this little curve. So let's assume that this is just some weird piece of geometry that's supposed to get scales on it. Now, what I'm thinking is let's use the exact polygons as a way of scaling something very specifically. So I'm going to make a duplicate of that, make this editable. Actually, we have to be careful. Well, that's fine. This is enough scales. So of course we get some interesting things, like we get this weird point on here. Everything is four polygon, or everything is four-sided. They're quads, but we get these little pinchy axes here. And well, let's see what we can do. I thought, let's see. The basic scale could be a good job for the very rarely used. What? Anyway, it's so rarely used, I didn't realize they removed it from here. I bet it's still in cinema, but they Bezier, nope. Yeah, it's this Bezier NURBS, but they removed it from the NURBS menu. Did they move it? I don't know where they might have moved it to, but here's the Bezier NURBS. So I don't, you don't use it too often. It's just kind of like a cube that's been put into a subdivision surface, but I like using this to make leaves and scales and things like that, because you get all these extra subdivisions, but you get these points that enable you to rearrange it. So I can do something like that, and you can see we get this nice smooth curve overall. And all I have to do is change 2 points. Now, this is actually generating quite a few points, so we're going to pull this way back 5 by 5. But it's under the procedural objects menu. I mean, isn't that this? Am I blind? Is it in here? I don't see it. Oh, well, it's not important. It's here, and you can just use the command manager or the commander Shift-C to find it. Okay, so we got this. Oh, and the other thing I like doing about this is the overall shape was 400, but now I can take all of these points, move them up 200 units, and now the axis is right. If I go off the point mode, but the object mode, you see my axis is right here at 0. So it's just a handy little thing. Oh, and I forgot the other main reason I grabbed it like this is because we can grab these middle points and I can pull it out, and now we get this nice curve to it. So a little bit more like a scale. All right, excellent. Now it's going to be way too big for our piece of geometry, obviously. Let's give it a unique color. By the way, I don't really think that this is going to work, but let's just see how far we can push it. Let's make purple fish scales. Okay, I'm going to scale it down to approximately the size of one of these polygons, even though they are all intentionally different. Drop inside the cloner, clone onto the object. The object is this thing. I want to clone onto not every edge, but let's try polygon center. So really ugly in the beginning. Actually, I'm starting to think that we might need to put it on the edge, but I don't know if that's going to work. Because if we do it like this, that there is no orientation, but I believe if we put it on an edge, we are going to be getting an orientation. We're just getting 4 times the amount that we want because it's creating one for every single edge everywhere. So my next thought turns into, let's say that we don't want to clone every single edge. I want to clone every 4th edge. Okay, that was just an idea, but it didn't work. It didn't work because even though we're cloning onto these edges and 3 out of the 4 are just nulls, and what's nice is we do get this orientation comes along for the ride. The problem is that because of those different poles, because of like this right here, it's changed. Like these are sharing an edge and that's sharing an edge, but it's changing the way it. So if this was just on a plane, that would work. It's not just on a plane. It's on this crazy shape. Now we don't have there's no flow direction here. So that's gonna be one of our challenges, is how does it know what direction to face? And this doesn't, this doesn't even begin what I consider to be the actual problem, which is stopping them from intersecting and to properly scale them, which is what I was thinking was our real trick. Paul, that's an interesting idea. procedural. Everybody's saying that they saw it here. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, the Bezier is down here. They used to be in the NURBS object, and now it's in the primitive objects. Good to know. I was wondering why it was turned blue instead of green. Okay. Anyway. Paul's suggesting that maybe we use hair and we brush it. That's a pretty good idea. It's a pretty good idea. It would you'd have to brush it, but you know what? Like, I don't think you're going to get the scales for free, and that's a pretty good method. What I was about to lean on would be like projecting, like shrink wrapping a more coherent shape, like a sphere, onto an object like this, but that wouldn't work everywhere. So you know what? Like I say, I'm kind of liking that idea of using hairs to do it, and then it's not polygon dependent anymore. Although, well, I mean, we're not going to get the scale. I don't know, the scale for the scales. It's going to be a tricky one, but you know what? It's a very interesting question. It's one I would like the answer to. So I got the raw mesh selected. I'm going to add adding a hair object makes sense. So what this is currently doing is creating a single hair, or in this case, what will be a scale on every single point. And I think that's fine. That's going to give us nice distribution. Now, one of the big tricks is that we're not getting unique scale from these. There's nothing about this mesh that's going to enable us to automatically scale these. But well, let's just keep moving on. Let's just see if there's something to pursue here. Under editor, no, not editor. Let's go to generate. I don't want to render hairs, but what I would like to do is make an instance. What is it an instance of? It is an instance of our Bezier. And with any luck, should that happen right away? Editor, generate. Shouldn't we? Oh, it might be actually doing it already. I'm going to open up my hairs by double clicking the hair material, and let's try giving it some thickness. Try 11 by 11. Oh, we should definitely be seeing something. Okay, I did something wrong here. Maybe that needs to be made editable. It's putting up on Y, so that should be correct. Sweep instance. I mean, instance is what we got. I don't think frame update's a thing. It's only doing guides. Someone is saying, yeah, it's based on guides. We could say that the hairs are generated as guides. I'm gonna make this editable. I'm still not there. Make it editable. Drag in that one just to be sure. Deform, bend, hierarchy first, keep aspect, keep texture. Okay, I'm doing something silly here and I'm not sure what it is. I just gotta find the right checkbox I'm missing. Display guidelines. Hairlines. Hair polygons. Generate. No, I don't want to do any of these because I want my geometry. I thought if I turned on my geometry, it had nothing to do with this. And this is not our shape. That is not the scale. That is not the scale. La, 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 la. I just want to do some tests. If I say I want to generate a square, the thickness, yeah, the thickness here should be the only thing that matters. And we got a pretty, it is definitely got some thickness on it. What am I missing? This should just be generating geometry. It's a very straightforward thing. I've literally done this dozens of times. Tobias, that might be a good idea, but first we need to generate some geometry. Generate. triangle. That should be sweeping. Dean, we already made the thickness 11. I mean, this isn't that big of a model, so we don't need to, if like we should be very, very clearly seeing something already here. What am I doing wrong? I am making some sort of silly mistake here. I'm gonna make a sphere, make it editable, simulate, add hair. Immediately, we'll add a thickness of 22, 22. All right, excellent. Now, that's all good. Generate triangle. Boom. See, it's there. What's different? Like, it should be as simple as that. All right, well, I just don't trust what that's doing at all, so do it again from scratch. Simulate. I have a object selected. Simulate hair, add hair. Before we do anything else, we will generate a square. Okay, it is generating that. Give it some thickness. I'll say 11. It should get really huge. That's fine. And now I'm going to say, okay, nice. That is what I wanted. Don't render the hairs. I do want this to be an instance, and the instance is going to be the Bezier object. Okay, it's not accepting that. Let's put in the made editable one. It does take that one, not surprising. And now you can see that we get our piece of geometry actually being generated. Now, under hairs, I'm going to say I don't want to see individual hairs. I want these to be as guides. So there's literally as many as there are guides. No idea. I don't know what we just did differently on this time than the previous time, but there you go. Now, the nice thing is how we can control the scale of these just via this thickness. So because we're already controlling the shape completely via the Bezier, these should be the same number. So 55, 55 should make nice big fat scales. So those are the super duper duper basics. So we got scales. Now, the fun thing maybe is not something we do very often. We can move into the hair tools. I'll pull this off, and we have all of our brush tools. So grab a brush, and we should be able to just start painting these and follow the curvature of our object. Now, this is going to fall on the person making it to, first of all, build the overall flow of these, but it's also going to be on them for making sure they don't intersect. There's nothing here to prevent intersection. And you can immediately see as we comb, like, a lot of this is pretty nice. But very quickly, you're going to see there are a lot of intersections, and we have to be very precise on a lot of these. So there's, this isn't like a instant foolproof, instantly working method. But as far as quickly creating something, it's not horrible. If you ever go too far with these, you see, like even here, I can just go nuts and like straighten them all out and follow that curvature. You can always go back to the straighten, and actually it's going to apply to everything. I don't know if it has to be on everything, but yeah, it's got everything. I could select some of them. I can just pull this a little bit and have them, go a little bit more straightened up. All right, so now let's just say, okay, we did that, and it's neat, but I wouldn't call these amazing scales. And also the orientation seems pretty arbitrary. You see that these are following the curve properly, but over here, I guess some of them are, that one's backwards, but some of these are correct. I don't trust that. Overall, it's not an amazing method. So, and then, so there's that. And now I do want to see if there's anything we do about scale. I think it was Eric. I'm not sure who said it, but somebody was saying something about, I'm scrolling to see if I can see it, but it's too far back. Oh, there it is. No, Tobias, using a vertex map potentially to drive the scale in the hair material. I just don't know if that's going to work, but I like the idea of giving it a test. So we'll do the very basic version. We'll grab our mesh and select a vertex weight, set it all to 0. If I double click that, I can just paint a vertex map. And there we go, just a basic one to do a test. So vertex map, painted it a little bit. Inside of our hair material, inside thickness, I will attempt to add a vertex map. And in there, we'll drag said vertex map. and doesn't seem to have any effect, which is unfortunately, I thought there was a really good chance that would happen. Here, you can see they all get sad. Yeah, the vertex map is not going to be fed through on a shader, so straight up limitation there. I don't think the guides have a growth and like they have this overall length, but that doesn't have anything to do. There's no place to feed a vertex map inside of it. I think literally not any place to put any of them. So like, as far as automatically doing it, we could have done a process to try and make the vertex map be brighter the smaller that they are. That could have been something to do. Now, having said that, we do have the option, using those same, I shouldn't have closed them, but using those same hair tools, there's a cut tool, and I can go through and cut, and it's actually going to make these scales shorter as I cut them. Now that is on an individual scale basis, but you could scale them down. At this point, like, we are spending a lot of time trying to wrangle these when really what we want is a parametric option. So all this manual stuff is, essentially going against the principle that we're trying to do, which is, to what degree can we automate this? Like I said, I didn't have a great feeling on it, but we've been tackling some tricky questions this season, and we've been getting good answers. So I thought there's a chance we'd think of something clever. Feeling like we don't really have any option here as far as doing something very parametrically or even just a cleaner process. Nothing is immediately jumping to mind. The copying the surface, open the new one, paste in the shape. Like, what I would love to do is, like, explode all the polygons and then select like a certain edge, but we need some sort of programmatic way to choose which edge should be selected. Like, just as a for instance of what I'm trying to do here. If I were to select all the polygons, hit U, Shift D, which will pop open the disconnect menu. I'm going to say don't preserve groups. We've now exploded every single polygon. So, I guess we could have done it this way as well. I can hit I for inner extrude and just inner extrude a little bit. UI to invert, delete. Now you can just see we have a bunch of individual polygons. So it's like, okay, well, these are kind of these are the flow of the mesh. Now, if we could, we could throw these all into a subdivision surface. And if we had a way of selecting like the fourth edge, and the fourth edge actually meant something, like some sort of rule, we could use various techniques in cinema. For instance, this is always one. Well, here's one I don't use too often, but we could select. It's a pain to select these because I'm going to select everything behind it. But if you select certain edges, we can use. Oh man, I never remember where this is because I use it so rarely. I literally lose this. Mesh. Tools. Where is the subdivision surface like weight tag? I don't remember what it's called. Certainly not showing up in any obvious place here. Well, maybe here it is. Weight subdivision surface underneath mesh add. If I click and drag, nope, not quite working there. It did create the tag. Maybe the tag needs to exist first. No. Set, no. Points, maybe. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I held down shift, converted my edges to points, and then if I click in the viewport and drag, you can see that, boom, it's going to sharpen up those two edges that I had selected. So, okay, that's something. And if we could make something that was a little more parametric, then we could be like, okay, that's these bottom edges are flat, and then select, if let's just say we only had these two polygons selected. If we had a way of automatically selecting, let's say, the bottommost edge on every one of those polygons, then we could do that and then hit UI in, well, no, not UI, UI, and invert the selection, and then do some sort of parametric, push these outward, and then potentially do some sort of subdivision. This turns into an entire modeling process, MF, to do a cut down the middle. And we could select those and potentially grab just the top middle point. So you can see how I'm doing a very manual process here, but that these would flow over the mesh quite nicely. And even at a certain point, you could be, okay, cool, that is what they are. I now scale all of them. But that's on an individual polygon basis. We just don't have any way of, modeling, or of doing that process parametrically through the entire mesh. Every step of the way through everything I just did was a very manual process. So undoing here, just imagine having to go through and select every bottom edge of every one of these polygons. That'd be absurd. Now, I'm not saying there wouldn't be some way to do this with code, which would be, like select every polygon, select the bottom most point, select the second most bottom point. Cool, that is the bottom of the polygon. Like, there's ways of doing that. But given what we have now, there's nothing I can think of. I mean, Paul, Paul's throwing out some good suggestions, but like, I don't like a cloner plus an aim effector plus a push apart, and some dynamics. Like, I don't know. At that point, it's just getting completely insane. The Although you're saying dynamics there, it's funny because it does make me think of one completely absurd process. Let me think. If we did take this overall shape and then we clone, this will be weird. I'm gonna go grab our original scale. And we'll go back here, paste it. So we've got a scale. So if we were to take a cloner and feed this in and clone onto an object, and on the object, I'll just say every single point. Then we get all of this. And now I guess the orientation is going to be super duper tricky, because if we want these to face properly, I'm not sure what axis we want. There we go. That's the one. Negative 90 degrees. So now they're all pushed perfectly outward. The rotation isn't working too well, but those are all facing outward. Now, if we were to do the aim, the target effector rather, now you can see they're all facing it. So this doesn't work everywhere, but assuming you want everything facing the same direction. By the way, I think having done that, is my original 90 degrees doesn't do anything. So you can see that these are all just rotating to whatever angle. So the target is sort of overriding everything. There's different orientations that we could select here. I'm actually quite certain that none of them are going to be correct, because it's going to be mostly about the object rotating correctly. So the easy fix for this would be to also create a plane effector afterward. And now this is rotating after the targeting. So now what would I want that to do? I don't even know what I want it to do, to tell you the truth. The point being is, if I were to rotate these all like this, you can see that this top part has a very nice orientation overall. And then if I were to take all of those and rotate them on, say, this axis, now they're not overlapping too badly. Now they're actually kind of tiling like a scale from a certain point of view. So then, and this, once again, we're not doing anything dealing with scaling, although you can, if we, I didn't think about it, if I change this to polygon center instead, we can enable scaling, and now they will scale based on the scale of the polygon. So that actually gives us that goes a long way. Okay, so now you can see we got all the scaling, and they're all kind of an orientation, not for the entire model, but for a good portion of it. So what my thought then is we can't just rotate them automatically, but if we did an absurd thing, which would be to put some sort of hinge on them and make them dynamic, that's the insane part here. So I'm going to temporarily turn that off. So we've got our clone make a what were you going for? Dynamic connector. And we can say how we want this to be able to rotate. So let's keep it as basic as possible. I'm going to say it can just rotate on that orientation. Make it a child of that object. This connector wants to connect from there to the surface of the overall object. If we make a bunch of clones, and now you can see those all been connected. Now these connectors I don't think are going to work. I'm also very worried about hitting play. Oh, they're not dynamic, so nothing's going to happen right now. Let's turn this into a collider body. Oh, even that, I don't even know if collider body makes any sense. Static mesh is fine. And then these will be a rigid body. I don't think any of this is going to make any sense because currently these are going to ignore collisions on that internal structure, although I can think of a way around that as well. Save a file. When we're about to do something really dumb, you save. Okay, let's try hitting frame forward. I'm pretty sure the individual clones aren't going to work, but they might. Oh, actually, they do seem to be connecting even within the cloner. So, okay, that's nice. So, and they seem to be running okay. So you can see if I play, they're all kind of tilting and doing their own thing. So they're weird, but they're working. So now I'm going to turn off gravity, Command or Control D, Dynamics, General, no gravity, and then create a simulation, forces, wind. And this wind I want to blow towards the model. And it's always too weak in the beginning, so I'm going to set to 55. It's been playing okay, so I'm going to play. And I can see, okay, in general, they all tried to tilt backward, but they're not. They're going to immediately be stopped by, I guess, the other. Why are they stopping? Like, okay, I guess like the ones that have enough room fall over and then they're blocking the next one from being able to fall. Is that sort of what's happening? Is that sort of what's happening? I'm not sure. Now I'm going to change our connector to, it's probably a bad idea, but I'm going to change it to a ball and socket, maybe even a ragdoll. No, ball and socket. Ball and socket can rotate anywhere. So ball and socket can rotate any direction. So if I play, these should all a lot more freely be able to wiggle amongst each other. And yeah, you can see them start. Yeah, some are going to rotate down and push out of the way, but they did successfully tilt backward a little bit more. Not as much as we want, but there's a lot of overlap happening right now. This is weird and fun, so I am willing to continue for a little bit as long as we're getting something interesting going. I can crank up the wind up a little bit. On the actual dynamics, we got all this friction, no bounce. And then I'm going to add a lot, 99.99% linear and angular damping to strain the energy back out again. So now we hit play, and now they should be going anywhere the wind tells them to, but no more than that. So they're trying to settle into the most comfortable position they can given the current condition. So, okay, so I will say it's not working everywhere, but look right here. These are the best scales I've ever gotten right there. Look at these awesome dynamically placed scales. That's pretty cool and crazy already. So like I said, we were only kind of looking at it from one point of view, and that worked. But the wind, that makes sense because, well, it makes sense in some spots. Like back here, that wouldn't make sense because the wind's not going to blow in that direction. Although, maybe using some field forces, we could get, like right now, the wind's just blowing in one direction. And if we were to use field forces, we might be able to get a particular orientation around the model a little bit better. I'm not sure about that, but let's just deal with like some of the problems we're getting here in the front. So you can see these are falling backward. They're all very large, so that's potentially a problem. We'd want that's just the sheer scale of them. I feel like is trouble. Now, this is here's how much the scaling is going to affect it. So let's just not let's not even do that. There is no scaling on here, so they're all the same size. Hit play. Let's see. Okay, well, I mean, with them being smaller, not surprisingly, they're able to kind of blow in the correct direction better. And now overall, the surface is working a lot better. Now this curvature there is not horrible. Okay, you know what? Like we're getting somewhere. This is weird. Weird and interesting. Let me think. How do we get them to point in the proper direction? Because I feel like it shouldn't be that difficult. I'm trying to think of, like, can you generate? We could clone onto this. No, that wouldn't give us a rotation. You could generate a single polygon. I'm trying to think if there's a way of using hairs to generate like an orientation for us, because it does a good job of that. And we could generate a single polygon on each one. That would be neat. All right, let's slow down here a little bit. Let's see what we're getting. Turn off the target effector. Okay, so now we're just back to regular old cloning. And let's go back to negative 90. So now they're all just spun outward. We are cloning onto the polygon center, but that doesn't give you much of a direction. Edges would give a direction, but every other one, and not literally every other one, but almost every other one would be doing a different orientation. We don't want that. Points, I don't think, do any better of a job. Vertex, yeah, the orientation is just nonsensical here. You see that the rotations are all over the place. So then, but given that as a premise, if we turn on the target, I just don't use target effector that often, but I wonder if there is an orientation that we can get that would be handy. And then the direction it's facing gets really, really specific as well. Target object. There's also, those are directional for the flow. Paul, what are you referencing? If you hit T, you get the scale for what? I'm not sure what you're referencing, so be more specific. Oh. You're joking. I thought, hey, if you're going to be all excited, I'm going to take you at your word. So, okay, these are all pointing to the left. So that has to do with the orientation. Man, I wish I had a better feel for the axis here, because this is using pitch, but if we turn off pitch, then now everything is, how does the targeting work then? Yeah, now it's just a rotational angle. We can reverse the heading, which will invert them. We don't want to do that. Repel, I mean, there's so many combinations here, and they're just not things I have too much experience with. Kind of what I want these to do is just aim outward, and then look at next node. Oh, they can aim in the field direction. Ooh. There's a lot of options. I forgot these get field directions now, and field directions can get crazy. Field direction, and so that's going to be looking into this fall off, and if we feed in this model as a surface, then that will generate, I don't actually want it to, this shouldn't affect the clones, it should only affect the direction. And yeah, so this is now affecting direction based on the surface of the model, although everything seems to have moved very strangely, and I don't know why that would happen. It's just a target effector. Why would the direction change the position? Turn off repel. Oh, repel was still on. That was doing something. All right. So yeah, this is, it's referencing the surface. There's so many variables here. We would just be clicking and clicking. Oh, look, we're getting a little SIGGRAPH reunion in here. Hi, everybody. Normals. Use the normals. The problem is that we need to control 2 axes. That's the part that's throwing me off here. Create a spline. I mean, I kind of want only on a particular orientation as well. there's so many, like, the problem is that right now there's too many options. There's too many places we might be able to travel with this, because like the next thought that pops in my head would be us creating a series of loops like this. So if I were to be like, create a series of loops, and you can see we're going to be missing certain places, so it doesn't work perfectly. But if we were to do this type of slicing and then Shift C, edge to spline, then now I've got a spline and I could clone onto the spline. If we turn that on, then now, I want to turn off the targeting because that's just getting weird. This spline, I think, will give a lot better orientation overall. If we set that to a certain number of steps, set that to 25, we can start getting very even distribution of these. And I guess it wants a rail spline. That would be pretty easy in this kind of basic setting up of the model. Just scoot that forward and feed it that as a rail spline. So there we go. Now everything has the exact same orientation. So this is kind of the orientation I'm going for. It is not rotated correctly, but is the orientation I'm going for. Get rid of that 90 degrees, and let's find the proper one. Looks like negative 90 combined with 90. And then we could spin it. I'm not sure which axis it is to spin, but the point being is, you see how the curvature of these is all facing forward, although half of them are facing inward. So that's just the thing that happens with splines, where the direction is alternating. I don't know what triggers it to alternate one way or the other. So even that's being a little bit of a pain. But yeah, we could twist them as well. None of these axes is doing a good job twisting. This also happens sometimes. Maybe that's being overridden by the, that might be getting overridden by the orienting to the spline. So if we were to take this plane effector, yeah, there. If I take the plane effector and increase H, it does rotate. So this isn't working on all of them, but you see this single row, you can see how they're all oriented in the correct direction, and I can put that little bit of twist in them so they're not intersecting each other. So if I could get that to happen everywhere, that's what I'm trying to get. And then once we had that sort of a rig, then we could blow the wind on it. And I think even now it's still set up for it. If I hit play, maybe all these ones on the ground are going to break it. Maybe they're intersecting each other. I'm not sure. Okay, just as proof of concept, I'm going to delete all except for, I think this one, UI, delete all the splines except for that. Must have more than one. I'm going to delete that. Delete that there. Now you see I have a single spline. The cloner is taking a second to catch up again. And honestly, even this one without a rail spline, it's still doing the correct orientation. So, that's fine. A single spline there. If I hit, I turned the wind off. Let's turn the wind back on again. Okay. And then you see this will blow them all backwards, and they are intersecting each other, but they're not colliding with this mesh because this is telling them not to collide with that mesh. So if I turn that off, they will collide with it. And now you can see that we get a series of scales all lined up there. And if we were able to, we're not, but if we were able to, I'm going to select that spline, click, don't do this too often. Can we clone? Maybe we can copy and paste. Copy, paste. Yeah, nope. I thought in R21, when you copy and pasted points, copy, paste, no, paste in the viewport. No, it's putting them as a new object. Maybe if I hold down control. Okay, if I hold down control, it's working. And now you can see I can make a copy and a copy and a copy. So still, this isn't exactly what we want to be doing. But you see if I hit play, now we're going to start getting pretty nice scales lined up. This is turning into, well, let me take a step back. It's a little bit, Effectatron, fake it. I don't want to fake it. We're trying to make it real. It's no fun to make it fake. You can see that by doing a little bit of this process, they're going to layer up very nicely. So essentially this is what we're going for. I'm just trying to think of better ways of automating this where we can kind of be on any mesh direction. Now we did just select a series of loops and a bunch of them were the wrong direction. but the spline does such a good job of giving it the correct direction. Now, I don't want to count out the target effector. The target effector very well might be able to do something like this, but it's a very particular combination. That's the kind of thing I wouldn't want to do in this stream. That would be more in the bonus stream to do that type of thing, because there's a lot of places we can push this. Well, and the hope goes to using field forces. If we could get a flow of particles traveling the surface, then the wind could blow in every orientation and not just blow straight backwards, but also like blow upward here where it needs to, and then blow downward as it goes down the back. There'd be a lot of combinations we could get. I gotta say, I am quite pleased with how clean the what am I even trying to say? I am impressed at how fast the dynamics are running. Sorry, completely lost my train of thought there. This happens when we're getting something that's almost working. Now these are already colliding, so I expect a bunch of them to freak out. Yeah, top ones are better, but yeah. So we need this to be on the mesh very, very, very cleanly and only in one orientation. So doing this type of cut makes sense. Zach, putting a helix around the model has potential. I'm also thinking, let's see. I'm going to copy the original model, go into a new file, and we could potentially also just do a series of cuts. Let's continue to be like, okay, we want to travel backward along the overall surface. I know we got a weird shape here, but we're intentionally trying to make it difficult on ourselves. So if we go to our side view, and let's go to polygons, and we go to knife, and I say I want to do I think it's a plane cut. So KJ, we get a plane cut, and currently it's in free mode. I want it to be on world mode. And what axis are we? Okay, we can see right here how it's cutting. That's not what I want. Let's try the ZY. So there you can see we're getting a cut across it. So that's cool. But here's where it gets interesting. We can say I want a number of cuts, and I can see I get 10 of them. So if I were to say, let's say, not that many. Let's do 50 cuts with a spacing of 20. So now if I move my mouse over in the proper spot, you're going to see that we're going to get a whole bunch of little cuts. So I'm going to now say I want to select those cuts. So now when I go to cut the object, let's do right there. Now if we go to edge mode, those are all selected. So boom, we've got a bunch of cuts perfectly cutting through the entire object. Now we say Shift-C, type in the word edge, and find edge to spline. So now we've got a spline, and copy that and then hit undo because we didn't need all those knife cuts on the actual object. So now we can paste the spline back in again, and now we've got a bunch of evenly spaced cuts around there. Now I do not trust for a split second, I'm going to copy that spline. I do not trust for a split second that this spline is actually going to return everything in the correct direction. So let's just see what it does. Cloner, feed that as the spline, and I imagine half are going to be pointed inward. Well, it looks like only 2 of them are going the wrong direction. You can see these are going the wrong direction. Now, I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to make just to show you, copy, new file, paste. If we select point, select all, right click and say create outline, and I start growing this, these are all going to push out, except, this won't work. Well, this won't work because you can see that we have a handful of splines that are traveling inward instead of outward. So the fix here is to manually find the ones that are not working, which is not many. And go figure why some of them go one direction, some go the other. But we can now pretty easily tell via our clone here that everything up front is working well. But then here, that's a bad one. And there's a bad one. So I selected 1 point from each. I'm going to hit UW, which selects all the points that are connected to the current ones. And if I right click and say point order reverse, then that flips those around. Well, it flipped one of them around. I select this one, UW. And I can't figure out what's wrong with that one. Let's reverse the order again. Reverse sequence. Yeah, that one's still being weird. What's wrong with you, little fella? Hide the surface. Point order, even, yeah. I mean, you just see the very, very occasional weirdness that we get. Select one of those points. I'm going to say set first point. Okay, I set a different point at the first point. It was okay with that. So very, very strange. So in any case, we now have an entire series of scales. Now, let's intentionally poke holes in our process here. You can see because we had this big horizontal section here, they was traveling vertically, rather, that did not get enough scales. But the rest of it has done a pretty dang good job. The orientation is pretty good. All the dynamics and everything are still set up. I'm just going to hit save again, and let's hit play. Okay, we have a lot more of them, but now we can see that the wind is blowing them backward, and a lot of it has done a pretty dang good job. You can see that these all tilted backward beautifully. Those are the best. Those are now the best scales that I've ever made. So that's nice. Some of these aren't quite sure what to do with themselves. In fact, oh, look at this. Look, there's this one set is rotated wrong. I didn't even notice it, but yeah, we've got one more rogue spline where the scales are backwards. So I'm going to do the same trick. I'm going to select a single one of the points and try and set that as the first point. It did set it as the first point. Also, let's try closing the spline. Ooh, don't close the spline. That suddenly freaked everything out. So let's try. Why are these faced the other direction? Now that might. Why would that happen? Actually, looking around, there are several that are facing backwards. So this goes back to the rail spline idea. So that's actually not bad. If we make a copy of the spline, move it forward, and then in the cloner, feed in the second one. Which was the second one? Yeah, that one. Let's rename it rail. Feed that in as the rail. Then, okay, well, it did something to these, but all those bad ones have flipped around, which is now making me think that those flipped. So we just did as clean of a process as we could. We did perfect knife cuts on the entire mesh, and still we're getting these things flipping around. So, I mean, while I don't think this it's not taking a long time to fix what we're seeing. I'm trying to get these two. I want this to be a rail spline does not have to be very offset. So I'm going to try and move them very close to each other so I can select both. And now let's see what the fix will be. If I just select the point, yeah, so I got those 2 points. If I say set first point, that didn't change anything. If I set UW, select all, or select connected, and reverse the sequence, that did fix it. So the rail spline combined with that fixed it. So not insane. I'm going to select. So far, I've been lucky. I haven't selected points on the opposite side. If I were to rotate my mouse and the axis was in the center, then we would know something went wrong. So that seems okay. UW select, point order, reverse sequence. That seemed to have fixed all of them except for one, very picky one. UW, point order, reverse sequence. Okay, it did work that time. Okay, now there's no backwards ones. So a little bit of fixing time was required, but that wasn't too bad. Now we hit play, let these all blow backwards. With those fixed, the overall flow is working a lot better. So yeah, not bad there. The scale of them is going to have a very big impact. Let's save it. So we have a lot of control over the scale. I mean, we could even use effectors. That's what's cool is this is super live. So we can see that along the top here, when I hit play, the resolution, essentially there aren't enough scales and they're all running into each other. So we want those to be a lot smaller. And I think we could probably just create an effector and shrink them. So with the cloner selected, I'm going to create a plane effector. Pull this up. Actually, I guess I need to pull it up. I'm going to say scale in a uniform way, in an absolute way, negative. Now we're going to see all of them shrink. So that is how small they would get. Then I can create a fall off. And in this case, I will just create a capsule fall off, not one I use very often. Move it over here. X plus for some reason instead of Z plus, which I should have been building at. T for scale. And now you can just see, the point being is these are all scaling over here. So those become smaller scales. And now, hopefully, what I want to see, the reason for doing this is I want to see if that continues to work with the dynamics. And yeah, it totally does. So if we gave this even a little bit more of a fall off, unhide that, give this a full fall off. Now you can see a bit of a better transition, pull it down just so everything can transition into that shape a little bit better. Then hit play, and that transitions better in there. And I mean, if we scaled it properly, then I think that those would start working pretty well. And look at that, like overall, not too bad. We're getting something somewhere. Let's see. I know the chat's going a little off the rails here, but we're still tinkering, so I don't want to get distracted. Now, there's a lot of different variables that we're playing with here. I wanted to give these a little bit of extra freedom to be able to tilt over. So these connectors are just ball and socket, but keep in mind we could have gone with a regular hinge, and now they can only, I think, tilt backward. Well, forward and backward. So they're not rotating at all. And you know what? That's doing a pretty good job. You can see up here, they fight a little bit more. So by turning that into a ball and socket, they can kind of rotate any direction. So if I play, you can suddenly see these all start scooting around each other a little bit more. I feel like that little bit of extra freedom goes a long way. Now, what I'm trying to think, this is pretty good, I gotta say. Like these are some pretty great looking scales. And I mean, look, these are clones. So if we were to remove this material, we can we can, of course, just add a random effector. Did I have it selected? Yeah, cloner. Random effector, don't affect the position, but instead affect the color. We can get random colorized scales and have complete control over the way that these are all going to be mapped and colored. So like, these are actually dynamic. And then, oh man, it would get super duper dangerous. But I've even got it in my head where if we did a spring connection, we'd actually make these soft bodies so they could actually bend over each other a little bit. And that bending could get the curvature going a lot better. And right now I'm just trying to, well, I mean, we could try and get a field flow that flows over the surface, correctly pushing everything in the right direction. Because what I really like is if these weren't, right now these are trying to pull backwards, but it goes to, do you create, if we could just get the surface to do it would be the best. But, like in a pinch, we could just make a second wind, and that wind would have a fall off to right around here, and that would blow these inward, and that would go a long way. But this is pretty incredible, actually. I really like this. I gotta say, there's like 4 different times while working on this one. Let's see, Control Alt Shift. That worked. There's like 4 different times I was like, we should stop. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere. But we plowed through, and we're getting something that's pretty good. So what I would love to do is do a, what I'd like to do right now is find kind of a problem area. Yeah, like this top part. Okay, this top part's a good spot where all these should be lying flat, but just by the way they're overlapping each other, you can see that they're fighting a little bit. I would like to do, I just saved this as a new version. I would like to do a much more limited test here and try and make them soft bodies, which is insane. But if we make it low enough poly, I think we can control it all right. So here's a thought. I'm going to select just those. That's plenty. Select connected. Oh, that's weird. That's grow selection. Select connected, and then UI delete all these. So now we've just got a couple of them. So we're going to get plenty of, oh, that's very interesting. Oh, I missed a rail spline. I was like, something's weird here. Okay, there. I accidentally missed a rail spline. UW, UI, boom. Okay, now we got that more limited. Let's get rid of that old one. We don't need it. Clone. Okay, these are all still facing the correct orientation. It's great. Now, the important part, let's go into just our model here. I'm going to scoot off to the side. So here's our single scale. Now, it's pretty low poly, but it's not as low as it could be. and we can always subdivision the surface later. So I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to hit UL for loop selection, turn on stop at boundary edges, and grab that. Grab that. How low do we go? I'm going to get rid of those as well. Very, very low poly. Right click and melt or dissolve. Dissolve. Yeah, dissolve was the correct option there. Got some extra points hanging out up here. I mean, yeah, I'm going to get rid of these two. Delete. There. Okay. 4 polygons of 4 sides. Very, very low poly. Now we have a connector, but this connector won't do anything when it comes to a soft body. So instead, what we need is a spring. Is going to get, this is a bad idea, but let's just find out. I'm going to create a spring. The spring becomes a child. Reset PSR. So there it is. I'm going to even scoot it right there, right to where the point is. And what is this connecting? Well, it's connecting the Bezier. What is it connecting? The center of mass? No, it's moving the specific polygon point. And the specific point is... there we go. 2. It's point number 2. You can see where it became very, very small. Now, currently the rest length is 100. It should be, I'm going to hit set rest length. You see it's almost at 0 because it's not quite on top of it. I don't need it to be directly on top. So there we go. We got a spring. It's right on top. Now, that's fine. Now, this turns into a soft body. We're currently draining lots of energy out. I've actually found out that that's bad for soft bodies, so we're going to go really easy on that. Although drag and lift that'll do a great job. Yeah, we're going to add some drag and lift to both sides. So that's going to drain the energy out from them moving too fast. And then we're going to go soft body, and the structure, very important. I don't want the stretch. But the shear, well, the shear, I want some shear. I don't want any damping. No damping, no damping. Flexion, I want it to be able to bend. Shear, I want it to be able to shear, but not that much. I'm going to set it to 10. And that's about it. So now, I don't know if springs work in a non-editable cloner, but we're going to find out. So Control, Alt, Shift again. Turn on the cloner. And they're soft. There's a lot of soft bodies. So I'm scared to hit play. So I'm going to go frame forward. Oh, that's not bad. So I'm going to hit play. It's running fine. Okay, so you can see they're getting away from the spring quite a bit. So let's see if we can chill that out. Well, I have a very strong wind right now. So let's chill the wind out a little bit. The spring, they're getting away from the spring, so we can, I'm going to crank the stiffness to 11. And that should stop it from getting, okay, that stopped it from getting away too much. And now you see that they're all blowing over. Now, these are soft bodies, all connected to the spring, and the, oh man, I can't believe this is working. And working this fast, too. I mean, I know it's super low polygon, but that's pretty good. So those are all bending. Now, it's incredibly low polygon, and that means that there's not much bend. So a little bit of flexion will actually go a long way. So I'm going to drop that to 1, and that should enable them to bend more. Even that seems like quite a bit. I'm even going to go easier on the structural so they can stretch. Let's see if that does anything. It's not changing a bunch. Flexion, 0. I'm a little worried, but let's see what happens. These are... Oh, wait, they're not soft body yet. No, I thought they were soft body, but they're not soft body yet. Look, I forgot to turn on soft body. So none of this has been doing anything. These are all the springs are behaving like a hinge. So, okay, now things are going to get bad. So we save it. Made of polygons and lines. It's now a soft body. I hit frame forward. It's still not bad. Still not bad. Structure back up to 100 because that's what we were originally expecting. Hit play. Okay, these are behaving more like a soft body now. You can see something's intersecting or exploding down there, but let's ignore that for now and just see what they're doing. Okay, now you can immediately see where see how they have a little bit more ability to like bend over each other. Now there's a little bit of overlappy turbulence happening, but okay, not bad so far. What do we need to do? We are already doing a lot of drag and lift. I'm going to crank that up to 99.99. Maybe even beyond, honestly, because I really want to be draining energy out from those. I don't want them wafting in the wind because we're going to start getting these feedback loops that could get crazy quickly. Yeah. Seems like the more time that goes on, the more they're going to be flailing about. Let's try completely getting rid of the aerodynamics. I just want to see what happens. And now you see they're whipping down a lot faster. And now you can see, yeah, I mean, the drag was going a long way because see how they're like oscillating really quickly. Now we got to keep in mind, it's just the wind doing this. So, and essentially this is behaving just like gravity if we had any. I'm going to slow the wind down, give it more time. Now you can see a couple of them are intersecting each other, and that's why they're suddenly like that pop for some of them. Some of them are like, oh, like I'm intersecting, like get out of the way as quickly as possible. Okay, now what I want to do is try linear damping, 99.99. Linear and angular damping. I've seen these behave, these numbers can make some soft bodies behave oddly, but if it drains energy out, then it could be okay. Not enough wind strength, back to 55. I mean, there's like that one frame that's okay, but let's see if we get the same oscillation. And it didn't really change much. We're doing a lot of energy drain here, and they're still oscillating. Now, usually oscillation is created by strong numbers here, but these are not strong numbers. In fact, I'm going to drop the structural down to 10, which should enable these to bend or stretch a little bit if need be. Not really changing anything. Shear, they can shear a little bit more. Flexion, they can definitely bend more if they want to. You can see they become quite floppy now. Still, wow, they're moving so much. There's so much wiggle on them. So with all that wiggle, let me double check a couple things. First of all, collision noise. Let's get rid of that. No collision noise. I just want to see if that, it'd be amazing if that had a big effect, but I don't think that, yeah, it never is. The springs still have springiness. Now, this isn't about stretching them, so I wonder if I've got it in my head from all the cloth stuff where I'm trying to drape wrinkly cloth over things. In that scenario, damping is very bad. But you know what? Damping is not always bad. So let's see what damping does in this scenario. It should be draining a lot of energy out from all of those. The waviness is still there, but it makes it more subdued for sure. Then let's see. Make this. I'm gonna make the wind. It's on YouTube too. Okay, cool. If it worked, it worked. I don't think you missed anything. All I did was the last thing I did was create a friction, and I cranked the strength up to 100, and it definitely is draining energy out. I'm gonna jump to 500. It's definitely draining a lot of energy out, but something's. I don't like how long that's taking to calculate. Yep, it exploded. It's draining the energy out better, but I mean it's stopping the oscillations, but it's not stopping the chaos here. It just there's just a lot going on, so that's not great. Now we haven't, by doing the spring method, we've introduced a lot of additional variables where we're now saying that this is very flexible. It's very, like, I'm gonna put the shear down to 1, so these can really stretch. The structure is even saying they can do that. So you can see that these are going to deform and change shape a lot more. But I think that's instantly going to a point where, yeah, we can't lower too much because now there's, they quickly cease to be scales. So leaving that on 10, leaving flexion on 5, draining a lot of the energy out. Like, and even that, it's frustrating because you can see that those are bending down, and it actually does a pretty good job of getting this curvature going. And then they start trying to fight back, and then we introduce that oscillation very quickly. Even though right now I feel like they did a pretty good job of filling in this tougher area. It's not perfect, but you see that's doing a better job of curving over the surface. One last major variable I'd like to play with would be changing the density. We found out that the density can have a very large effect on this. I'm going to make it 10 times as, I don't know if we want it to be lighter or heavier. I'm going to make it 10 times as dense. Not helping at all. Nope, not in a visible way. I'm going to make it 1/10 as dense from the start. Less oscillating, but they seem to be fighting back a little bit. Like they're maintaining their shape more, perhaps. I don't know. It's kind of half dozen to one. Then there's another thought I had would be, these are all hovering off the surface a little bit. I don't specifically have a problem with that, but if we turn this off, we can go back to the original scale. And as a small alternative, we could say that this will be based on 0.0, and I can scoot this over here. So the spring will be holding it on the corner. I'll create a second spring. And now you see it's on this corner. So now we have two springs. So both of those are holding, I say set rest length. So those are set. So now there's two springs holding the corners on. So they shouldn't be able to twist as much. And it'll be double the calculations for those springs, but I don't think it'll put us in crazy territory. And they'll just, I think it'll make everything a little more stable there. But it's not going to stop the oscillation problem. Or this bounce. And then, I'm just going to, let's try cranking. We got a lot of friction, so I'm going to put a lot of wind. And they are stretching. The extra wind, they're going to, and not in a bad way. They're flapping in the wind. It's bad for the current thing, but if these were supposed to be leaves or grass or something like that, then that wouldn't be a bad thing. But they stretched a little bit, but it's doing the curvature. Well, okay, a couple things. In a somewhat surprising way, this is working. It's working surprisingly well. We have not explored all of the possibilities, but the earlier version, let me pull that up here. Yeah, I kind of liked when they're all purple. So we'll put the purple back on. This layering up this way is pretty wonderful. I'm pretty happy with this. I think we can push it further. There's more that we can do, but actually getting a scale pattern and brute forcing dynamics in order to get it is pretty great. I like abusing the systems like this. There's a lot of possibility. If somebody was even to send me a screenshot like this, I'd be like, wait, how did they do that? So the fact that we got here, I'm pretty happy with. What I'd love to do is try and get, this entire thing with scales really should have been the type of topic we tackle in the bonus stream, because I like going deep there, or here I'd rather be tackling a bunch of smaller questions that we can be a little more confident about. But I do like exploring it. But if you like this type of content, then on Patreon, I do this kind of thing every Thursday where we just go crazy on one. So I'm trying to think of what I'm going to spend a few minutes to see if we can get a flow going on a field force. I'm going to copy that same weird shape we've been working from here, and let's see if we can get a flow on the surface. So I don't know if we will be able to, but let's tinker. So if we create what's the best way to show this? It's going to be difficult. Oh, actually, it won't be difficult. Well, to show it. Forces, field force. And in order to show it, we're going to crank that up, and we're going to make it about 1,000 tall and 1,000 on X. And then on Z, we're going to go 0. So we've got a cross section right here. Probably too big. We increase the resolution by cutting this to about half. I said about half. Okay, so now we've got this trapped in that shape. So if we were to feed this something, anything, let's say a random field, then now you can see we get all these nice little dots giving us a direction. So I'm going to turn off the vector length, and we should see them all be a little bit more static. So there's that. Now, instead of feeding it a field object, let's try dragging in our surface. Now, the surface, by default, is going to be viewing the points. I'm going to instead change it to surface. Now, surface takes a long time to calculate. The more complicated your model, the more that this is going to be killing your playback. It's just very important. But the nice thing is that we've got a normal here. This normal is perfectly facing away from the object. The problem is that there's no math to tell this to rotate 90 degrees. We can add 90 degrees, but that's an additive process where it takes this and changes the orientation in an additive way, but not in a rotational kind of way. So instead, we have not done this on stream, but I played with it a little bit. We will use a volume builder, and the volume builder can be set to a vector mode now. The vector mode, this is going to be weird. Let's turn off our field force. The volume builder, let's feed it the subdivision surface. And now you can see that this is doing something very similar. You can see that the entire surface has a series of normals coming off of it. But unlike what we were just doing, we can give this rotational directions. So I can put in a normalize, we can do an invert, but in this case, we might want to do a cross add, but let's try just doing a rotate. And by creating a rotate, currently it's on the X. I'm not sure which one we want this to be, but I'm going to say rotate 90 degrees. And you can see, okay, we've got an interesting flow around it, but it doesn't really have a direction. You can see it's very vertical in general, and it twists around and then travels down. So that's cool. But let's say we wanted to give it a particular orientation. I'm going to try clicking on Z, and now that these are definitely aimed upward and they're curving along and traveling there. These seem to be going forward, so that's kind of a problem. So that's a vector rotate, but you can see we actually were able to rotate those. Now, let me see if we can get this working. I don't know if we can, but I'm going to create a linear field. And what the linear field does, let me show you if it works. I'm going to make this big enough. In the builder, let's temporarily turn that off and put in the volume, and it's only creating this little one. But you see that this linear field has given us a direction. It's now in the direction of the fall off. So there's currently a bounding box on there. But if we turn on the surface and I set this to match the object below, it's now covering everything. This is now perfectly aiming backwards based on only that orientation. But currently we're combining by doing a normal. We could do an add, but add, this is the way it would look if we did this inside of a field force object, but instead we're in a builder. So now we're going to try a cross product. And the cross product is spiraling around perfectly. Look, we have a spiral, which is cool. But that's not actually what we want. So I wonder if we can spin. Well, if we change our linear field's orientation,